Playing is one of the most important ways that we learn, especially in our formative years, and later in life as well. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, play contributes to cognitive, social, and emotional well-being. Play enables us to use our creativity and increase our imaginative, cognitive, and emotional strength. As Einstein once said, play is the highest form of research. Now, has anyone been trick-or-treating? Maybe with your kids? It's super fun, right? Well, here's a picture of myself, my brother, and two of our friends post trick-or-treating. We came up with a game where we traded candy and obtained those coveted Reese's peanut butter cups. We had rules in place, and each of us had our own trading policies based on the candy that we liked. In the process, we learned the economics of supply and demand, negotiation, and empathy. As you can see, with our trick-or-treating, we developed a game to organize our play. And here's the kicker. We are all game developers. There are a lot of ways to define games. Let's keep our definition simple. One of my favorites is games are a structure for play. Now, many of us created the bulk of our games when we were younger, like 8 years old. We created variations of tag, hide and seek, and even now you can continue to bring game design into your life. If you enjoy cooking, you can make a game out of finding 4 random items from your fridge and creating some sort of dish. If you're a sports enthusiast, you could create a game where you compete with your friend about remembering stats for different players. You don't need to code to make games. It only takes a few rules to create a space where you can be imaginative, play, and learn. I've been making games my whole life, and that's what I plan on doing when I graduate. Let me tell you a story. In 7th grade, I signed up for the Strive program at my middle school. I was paired with a student who was struggling with classwork, and he was a bright guy, but he was having trouble finding the motivation to do his homework. One day, I noticed that he absolutely loved chemistry. He brought out a laminated version of the periodic table and he carried it around everywhere. So I made a game where he unlocked elements and he combined those elements into molecules as he completed homework assignments. The game helped motivate him to do his work, and we both learned a lot by turning work into play. Skipping forward to today, I'm working on my own video game studio where we develop games that help students learn one of my greatest passions, music. Video games are uniquely suited for learning because they allow designers to be extremely intentional about how they structure their game. That's why educational video games are so common in schools, and why teachers are adopting video games at higher and higher rates. On top of that, throughout the COVID pandemic, video games gave students a way to interact and connect virtually with companies like Roblox and games like Microsoft becoming extremely popular with teachers. Okay, so how can we be intentional about the video games that we make? Well, video game development can be complicated, and in fact, there are people who earn PhDs about game design and teach in universities, like my dear professor, Robert Zubek. To help us be more intentional as game developers, I would like to show you under the hood. Some of the things that we have discovered about game design and ways that we can think as developers. Professor Zubek wrote a paper about the framework, a framework for developing video games called the MDA framework. The MDA framework is an organized way for us to think about how we use rules to structure play with our game. MDA stands for Mechanics, Dynamics, and Aesthetics. I'll use the game I'm working on currently as an example for how to implement the MDA framework. Here's my buddy Venu playing the game with his flute. The game helps people learn music by listening to them play. The mechanics are the basic rules and components of the game. So in my game, I am currently working on one mechanic that Venu is using in the game, is that when he plays musical notes, the character moves on the screen. Another mechanic that you'll see is that when he bumps into an obstacle, the level restarts. Dynamics describe how the game is played based on the mechanics. So the dynamic here is that Venu attempts to navigate the space with music and avoid the obstacles. Aesthetics are how gameplay makes a player feel. In this example, Venu gets a feeling of challenge and adventure as he navigates with music. Rather than saying the game is just fun, it's much more valuable to focus on what the actual specific feelings are that we're creating as developers. So, and to recap this all, in order to be intentional about game development, we must consider the following. First, how do we want the player to feel as they play? Then, what dynamics or gameplay will make the player feel that way? And finally, what mechanics are we implementing to create those dynamics? It's important that we're intentional about game design, because if we're not, we will create a space that is not conducive to learning the way that we want people to learn, or feeling the things that we want the players to feel. If children are playing the game, the psychological implications of the mechanics and dynamics become more and more important to consider as well. And when we're intentional about our design, we can create spaces where people feel fellowship while learning vocabulary, like in Scrabble, or get a sense of adventure while learning music, like in my game, Intervallic. Beyond the mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics framework, one of the most important aspects to think about when developing a video game, or an educational game specifically, is motivating students to learn about the subject and helping them develop a skill. So what are we doing? Are we motivating students with our game, or are we helping them build a skill? When I started doing research about video games and how they could help people learn music, I found this 2021 study where researchers tested two types of the same game with a group of students. So the first type of the game was a stripped-backed, actually the first one was a full version of the game, with all the gamified components from art and story and everything that you'd imagine in a video game. And the second version was a stripped-back version of the game that was more akin to flashcards and quiz students about musical concepts and identifying notes. First, in the study, every student took a baseline test. And then after that, a third of the students were given test 1, a third of the students were given test 2, and a third were given both. The results were really interesting. What the researchers learned is that studies suggest that mechanics and dynamics, if you have too many of them, can distract students from building a skill. It's actually more beneficial to have a stripped down version of the game if you're trying to focus on skill building for students. But those mechanics and dynamics are also very engaging, and they elicit certain feelings and keep the students coming back again and again. They're much better for motivating students. Does everyone remember doing times tables as a kid? Well, I do, and though it was not extremely interesting, my school had a stripped-back game called Math Facts, and it was very effective at helping me build up my mental math abilities. On the other hand, I learned to type in 5th grade from a game called Type to Learn. It was packed full of mechanics and dynamics, and I'm embarrassed to say, but my friend and I would go in every day during recess and play this game. It was so engaging. The game gave me feelings of adventure, discovery, and progression. I still remember controlling submarines and connecting circuits just by typing. In my music game, the goal is to boost student motivation to practice their instrument, and so we included many interesting mechanics and dynamics. Whether we are making games for ourselves, our children, or for everyone, we must think about the rules that we implement in our games and how the rules will affect the way that people feel and learn. So, there are 3 things that you should take away from today. 1, games create a structure for play, and video games are one of the best ways to create that structure. Playing is one of the most important ways that we learn, especially in our formative years, and games help guide our play and help us reach our learning objectives. 2, as game developers, we must be intentional about our design and focus on the rules and mechanics and how they affect the way that players feel and learn. Finally, we, and I mean that, everyone here is a game developer, and we can create games to help us learn anything, even music. What games will you make? Thank you.